Let's Get To presents Good Wood, knocking around the majors with Andy Tomchesson.
So we're here with Andy Tomchesson for Good Wood, and I want to talk about Tyler Bauer's balls.
I mean, it's only the natural progression of where this segment is going to go. When you have a segment called Good Wood, the fact that we're 4 episodes in and this is the first time we've talked about anybody else's balls is pretty surprising.
It's pretty surprising. So to fill everyone in, and I think I might shock people by kind of de facto defending Mr. Bauer in this segment. News leaked that Trevor Bauer, or Tyler Bauer, as we refer to him, some of his balls were pulled out of the game to be inspected. We know that the MLB is putting a focus supposedly on foreign substances. What is unclear, has every pitcher's balls been thrown out or just Mr. Bauer's? First of all, to that regard, Andy, what do you know about the situation? Is it a cross section or just his?
Well, if you there's, as Astros fans, and I know that's not this segment, but there's some similarities to the memo that was sent out late 2017 about MLB is going to start cracking down on the use of video technology to help batters. March of 2021, MLB sent out a similar memo to all 30 teams indicating that they're going to start cracking down on foreign substances on baseballs. Tyler Bauer, Trevor Bauer, as his mother calls him probably, is one of the people who is probably the person who has the strongest level of suspicion around him, because he's also, ironically, one of the most critical of other teams doing that. Not necessarily accusing, but coming up everything but accusing. Certainly the Astros and a few other franchises of having pitchers who increase spin rates through using foreign substances. Now, the interesting thing in 2018 is that Trevor Bauer, right after his last round of this kind of accusations, his spin rate increased by like 500 rotations per second the next start. And he refused to comment on what could possibly have done that. Flash forward to 2019, he wins the Cy Young Award, or in 2020 wins the Cy Young Award. And his spin rate has stayed dramatically higher than the rest of his career. And so there's some feeling that his balls have been investigated or being investigated, A, because he's been outspoken about it, and B, because MLB operates on rumors and innuendo rather than hard facts.
Let's talk about the part you hit on first then. Is it because he's critical of the MLB front office and Manfred about all sorts of things, some of which I sort of agree with, some of which I don't, but he is not afraid to share his opinion. We know that Major League Baseball doesn't really like that. Is there any truth to the idea that it really is because he's been the squeaky wheel?
Oh, I fully believe that Manfred's front office and MLB under Fred Manfred, is absolutely the.
We're just changing everybody's names on this show.
That's right. I'm 50. They're the kind of organization that absolutely has a history of penalizing people for being critical of them, especially if it's somebody that has control, they have control over through means like this. So yes, Trevor has been outspoken about his disdain for the way Major League Baseball conducts themselves in a lot of different instances, was very vocal during the free agent period before he signed the giant contract with the Dodgers. And honestly, I think that led to his market being somewhat limited. Because while he did sign a huge $40 million a year deal with the Dodgers, I don't think there are quite as many teams pursuing as he wanted to believe there were teams pursuing or wanted to have people think. And I think that's because he's the kind of guy that speaks his mind. Right, wrong, or indifferent, however you feel about that, I do think there is certainly the strong enough circumstantial evidence to suspect that MLB is retaliating against him to put him in his place.
Much of that actually matters. I've read that ball players, hitters prefer there be a little bit of something sticky on the ball and not want to get murdered in the face. I also don't think, by the way, stealing a sign matters. I think both those are all things you can combat in game. How much of it really does matter that if they're applying a substance to the ball?
It's a really interesting time to go after this kind of thing. And it's doctoring the baseball is absolutely 100% part of baseball history. I know we're going to get the people who watch this segment and, oh my God, it's cheating and I can't believe the integrity of the game. It has literally been happening since somebody decided to throw a ball at somebody holding a stick. Pitchers are always going to try to find a way to get an advantage. The great scene from Major League where Eddie Harris is talking about how his arm isn't what it used to be, so it might be Vagisil. And if the umpire is watching you real closely, you're going to load up some jalapeno and put snot on the ball. And it just is. And batters know this. Batters are allowed to use pine tar to keep the grip on the bat. And there hasn't yet, George Brett notwithstanding that incredible historic meltdown, been any issue with that part of it. I think it's baseball trying to cause problems where there are no problems. And I think it's to a different degree than, a scheme that involves video cameras and trash cans. And I'm saying this as an Astros fan, that went a little bit beyond the pale. I understand the outrage by it. I don't think they were the only team doing it, but I understand why that's something you wanted to stop.
Sure.
But I don't see any incentive for a pitcher to stop trying to find an advantage when you have hitters who are trying to get bigger, stronger, faster, increase bat speed, use video technology, use all the things they can to make those pitchers look bad. Pitchers have to defend themselves. And I'm saying this as somebody who played as a catcher and by nature hate pitchers because they're weird and they stick out and they're let's put it this way. Trevor Bauer is outspoken. He is not outside the norm. And I think we can look at Scott McIntyre to know that pitchers are a little bit off.
Damn, shots fired. Yeah. And like you're saying, there's a response to everything in baseball. I would think outside of steroid use, where the only way to combat steroids was to also poison your body. Right. Again, I don't have a problem with sign stealing because that's the easiest one to defend, right? You change the signs. Look down the road, though. How much of this, and am I getting a little too tinfoil hatty on this? How much of it really is you're entering a CBA? That dude is going to be a thorn in everybody's side because he doesn't know how to shut up, and he's not necessarily clear as to whose side he's on. How much could it be preemptive shutting him up before that starts?
I think that's a huge part of it. Is if he knows he is under suspicion or under investigation, especially if this is one of those MLB investigations that takes 2 years to complete, which is weird because it's a baseball and you're going to be able to say there's a substance on it or there's not. They don't take the balls to labs. You've got a further problem with now identifying if there is a substance, who put it on there, because yes, it could be Trevor Bauer, but it could be his catcher. It could be the first baseman who has something on his glove.
I found that interesting that he was already laying out the defense before he was actually accused.
Oh, absolutely. Because
I thought that was very interesting.
It's a dance, right? And I think that's another part of it. That's how teams have gotten around pitchers being, and I hate to keep using Astros as an example. Mike Scott used to have his balls checked on a regular basis because they were convinced that he was filing down balls, that he had an actual.
And we recommend every adult male get their balls checked regularly.
Right, but not by Roger Craig.
Not by Roger, if you can help it, not by Roger. Yeah. I'm sorry.
Certainly not by Major League umpires. But it became this thing where the suspicion helped his mystique. It didn't help Joe Niekro when he was found with an actual nail file in his glove, in his hat, as a member of the Minnesota Twins. But this was in 1986 that Scott was being looked at. I think it was 88 when Niekro got caught on the mound with an actual nail file in his glove, not suspicion of, sandpaper and all. I mean,
I remember the sandpaper. Yeah,
it's just this nonstop parade of one side trying to get advantage over another, and I think the players know that to the point of sign stealing. The players aren't outraged by sign stealing. The fans have been outraged by sign stealing because they've been told by the media to be outraged by sign stealing. The
Oh
fans
yeah,
are not.
what are you talking about? Don't you see how every time an Astro gets on base, there's a yelling match? Oh no, wait a minute, they're just joking around with the other
Yeah,
player.
it's never happened. Even the fight last year between the A's was not about sign stealing. It was literally about somebody thought they got hit by a pitch and they were young and hot tempered.
Yeah.
I think the interesting things with Bauer, back to him, is that he has already laid out the defense because I'm sure his agent has told him what that defense needs to be. And he's a smart guy. He's an asshole, but he is a smart guy. And I don't think MLB wants to necessarily get in this fight. They're gonna because they don't do smart things. But I think you're basically putting this clamp on him that we're going to keep investigating and keep looking at the balls you throw all year long because we want you as quiet as possible. And if we end up having to suspend you, especially after the Dodgers get eliminated from the playoffs, then who's going to listen to you anyway? You're suspended. You're disgruntled. You're a big cheater. I do think it's also very interesting since I brought up the media, and I think what I say is always interesting, how quick to defend the media has been of Trevor Bauer versus somebody like Jose Altuve.
Well, let's talk about that. Buster Olney, who has now tried to use the most lawyery of language to say he never accused Altuve of using a buzzer, even though a person with that soapbox, that megaphone, an illusion is everything, has now bent over backward to defend Trevor Bauer. Are we left with is there any level of integrity left in any of this? How do I not just go to bed angry all the time?
I would assume bourbon. Austonian whiskey is very good to prevent you from going to bed angry. Are they a sponsor? They should be.
They actually are a sponsor of my other venture, Austonian whiskey. Help you go to bed when you're angry.
That's right. There's no that's what's so comical about it. There is no integrity. The media picks sides. They pick players that they want to promote and they want to destroy. And they wash their hands when they're proven wrong. And it's not just baseball media. It is the media in general. If I throw out a headline because I want to be first and not right, and it happens to be wrong, my retraction, that's going to be on page 30 of the garden section of the Sunday paper that maybe not even Saturday paper that nobody reads.
Right.
I don't care that you know that I was wrong. I want you to get that headline. Only's taken a different tact of saying, well, I never said it. I didn't say it wasn't, but I never said it did. Meanwhile, you have the alternate media, John Boy, who has made a career, and I would wager to bet that his value from a media perspective jumped up 500% when he started pursuing Altuve wearing buzzers and Reddick wearing a wire and all the things that turned out to be confetti and nothing.
And you're right. He built an entire career on it. And then to turn around and sell Astros shirts during the playoffs.
Yeah. There is no integrity because Olney would be the first person to introduce Altuve at his Hall of Fame induction if he was asked. So there's no good in it anymore. And that's, I think that's ultimately what it comes down to Major League Baseball. I was very excited to watch the Astros win 4 in a row. I was less excited to see them lose 3 of the last 5. I'm still going to watch every game, but just the ancillary nonsense that seems to be surrounding the game right now, I am losing so much interest in. And honestly, if there's a work stoppage, we may be doing a cooking segment next year.
Well, I really think we're going to have I honestly think we won't finish this season and we will not start the next one. I think that's how it's going to go. But
if you're using nonstick pots and pans, by the way, wood spoons are the way to go, and we can transition good wood into that. So I'm all set with a future plan if it goes that way.
It's funny. I actually told a good friend of the show that I was going to start a cross-stitching show if it happened. So we'll just do all kinds of crafts. Let's get 2 crafts. No, I'm with you. I think, I think the mental gymnastics are really just gross to watch. I don't know what we're left with. The media, like you said, not even just in baseball, but in all their walks of life. We've gone from Walter Cronkite being the most trusted man in America to Buster Olney, not even staying with the same sort of moral consistency. And it's a really sad state to be in.
Well, it's very apparent when Buster Olney and Rosenthal and some of the other big-time sports writers are carrying water for MLB. Even CBS Sports, because I was doing just a little bit of research before this segment, their article, and CBS Sports in general is very neutral. I think they're a good source because they leave the commentary out. Reported the facts of Trevor Bauer's balls being investigated and what the next steps are. And then if you look below the ad break, there's two paragraphs about why Bauer is being picked on and how he has so much suspicion around him. And it's just natural that Major League Baseball would be wanting to look at him. Major League Baseball is creating the narrative, just like they wanted to create the narrative of Orange Team bad. And the media, who don't want to lose their access because that's how they get paid, is carrying their water without question anymore. And that's disturbing. It's certainly disturbing when it's happening in baseball, just like it's disturbing when it's happening in national politics, just like it's disturbing when it's happening in any walk of life. This show's about baseball, so that's where the outrage is today. But it's when it becomes apparent, it's just, to use Buster Olney's words about Trevor Bauer, it's just gross.
It is gross. As we wrap up, then, Orange Team bad is continuing to play out. You had people cheering for Max Stassi to break the Astros back, booing Martin Maldonado. Doesn't matter that they were both catchers in 17 on the opposite teams that were playing.
Right.
But AJ Hinch is rolling back into Houston. We're recording this on the night he shows back up. By the time the episode drops, they'll have long been gone. What kind of reception do you think he deserves, not just from the fans, but from the team itself? And do you think he's going to get it?
From the last part first, from the team, I think it's going to be very positive because he had every opportunity to throw those guys in.
The front office, the organization is the Astros. Will he get a video?
I think he will, because I think that's handled at a marketing department level. I don't think Jim Crane decided Charlie Morton was getting a video. I don't think Jeff Lunau decided that was, happening. So I think that, yes, from a standpoint of recognizing that 70% of the tickets they have sold for that first game is going to be because they wanted to be there for Hinch's first game. And that's part of why Major League Baseball loaded it up at the beginning of the year, or close to the beginning of the year as they could. So I would expect Hinch to be professional. I don't think he is the kind of guy that's ever going to say a negative word about a former employer. I think the team is going to embrace him. And I think at batting practice, which you won't see on camera, there's going to be a lot of hugs and stories told and that kind of stuff. And I think Dusty's going to be cordial, and I think they'll shake hands and exchange lineup cards and everything's fine. And I do think there is a moment of, hey, thank you for everything that you did for your 5-year career here in Houston. 4-year career. Should have been 5.
Should have been 6.
From the fans, I think it's a standing ovation, and I think it actually plays into past the first game. I think you'll see it in probably some form and fashion, second and third game as well. Because Hinch, of all the actors, got the rawest deal. And I think he's the first person to admit that he should have been stronger in his opposition. Because I think, not unlike, to use a University of Texas reference, Charlie Strong puts up news bulletin board material and expected his players to get angry and tear it down, and they didn't. He kind of knew what kind of team he had. I think Hinch expected me putting a bat through the monitor twice should have been a strong enough message without me having to call you out, Carlos Beltran, or not me having to call you out, Carlos Correa, or whoever else would happen to be involved. And they needed more direct leadership. He didn't provide it. I think he regrets that. I think he said that he regrets handling it that way, but he didn't condone it. He did try to stop it, albeit in a weak way. Sure. And I will continue to disagree with Crane's throwing him under the bus as part of the problem. This is year-long suspension should have been enough, and he should be our manager this year. Lunau's a little bit different story because I think there were some issues with his organization as a whole. Witness to, all the scandals with yelling at reporters from his staff members and how he treated other front offices. But Hinch wasn't a part of that. Yeah. Hinch is a guy that took a roster that was very good and made them better. And, I can say from watching Dusty for the last 60 or 75 games, Hinch is in a different class as a manager for me personally, especially when it comes to handling a bullpen, which, part of being a catcher versus being an outfielder. I miss him, and I hope the fans, treat him the way I expect them to. And I think there's standing ovations, and I think there's a lot of love to be exchanged.
I'm just going to wrap it up there then.